Welcome to Not Alone Leaders in Conversation, a bi-monthly podcast where we delve into the minds and experiences of academic leaders who are shaping the future of higher education. Your host is Raphael Brass, professor at Georgia Institute of Technology and editor of Elsevier's Not Alone newsletter. In each episode, he will explore the complex challenges, decisions, and opportunities facing academic institutions today.
Some of the topics you can look forward to in this episode are challenges of modern university leadership, erosion of trust in higher education, meritocracy and inclusivity in higher education, and the future identity of universities.
Robert A. Brown is one of the most experienced academic leaders in the United States. He was president of Boston University from 2005 to 2023. He served as a professor at MIT for 26 years prior to going to Boston University. At MIT, he served as head of the chemical engineering department and as provost. He's a scholar in mathematical modeling of transport phenomena and is an elected member of the United States National Academy of Sciences, the National Academy of Engineering, and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, among many, many other honors and awards. I have known Dr. Brown for many years, so I will take the liberty to call my friend Bob, if he doesn't mind. Welcome, Bob, to Not Alone, Leaders in Conversation.
Thank you, Raphael. It's really wonderful to be with you.
It's always said that academia changes slowly. And there's certainly an element to that, but when I go back to when you and I started as professors, or even when we were students, the reality is that between then and now, there's a world of difference in academia. And hence, I don't really think it changes that slowly as the myth has us believe. One of the questions I always ask, would the leaders of the time, Jerry Wisner, Howard Johnson at MIT, all MIT presidents, Stratton, Killian, and other major leaders, would they do well now?
Well, yeah. It's always hard to say, right? This is acting like, could Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs today when they're throwing the ball 100 miles an hour, right? These are all great people in their time. They did amazing things. People like Killian played a critical role in the whole U.S. effort in World War II. Howard Johnson led the university through the Vietnam crisis and the riots and student unrest. But I do believe they were simpler times in many ways. One is that one indication of that from an MIT perspective is that the role of provost at MIT, you probably know this, as the chief academic officer didn't come into continuous existence until 1961. Before that, the institution was run by the president. They served as the chief academic officer too, right? And if you think about that today, having been a provost, that would be an impossible task today, right? And the reason is the number of constituencies you really have has grown so large. I mean, you have the students and the parents and your faculty and staff. But today, more than I think any time in the past, you have your alumni, politicians, and the subset of people you call donors, right? And these different categories of constituencies for the university make this split between what I call the internal workings of the university and the external necessities created a very different presidential role than I think was there for most presidents up until probably 25 years ago, right? And now today, I'll go on, because this is something I really feel passionately about. we've taken it too far in many places. The internal-external split between, say, the provost and the president has led to a very different management style for the institution that I think in many ways is unhealthy. Clark Kerr famously said, a long time ago at a Harvard lecture, he coined the phrase the multiversity for universities, and he said that a university had evolved into, and he was talking about big research universities, into a faculty held together by a grievance over parking, right? And that there was no common core left in the institution. And I'm afraid in many institutions, that's true. Now, Georgia Tech and MIT are not like that, right? Because they have a focused mission that's different than, in some cases, the large multiversities that we're talking about. When I came from MIT to BU, it was coming from that very focused institution, the one with 17 schools and colleges, right? With a full range of things, and trying to pull it together and have one concept of what the university stood for was a much bigger challenge than at these other institutions.
Yeah. No, I think you have pointed out to a major change in the way universities are run these days. That division of duties and responsibilities is becoming more and more apparent. Now, maybe and maybe not related to that evolution is the issue of trust on higher education. Unfortunately, we must say, the confidence on higher education expressed by the public last year hit a low of 36% of the public felt good about higher education. That comes from a period 10 years ago only that was 57%. This last year, it went up 6 points. I have no idea why, maybe you do, to 42%. What's behind that erosion? Has higher education really changed that much? Is it an external effect that we have little control of? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's a very complicated issue, and it's one thing that I think that's really important for us to realize. It didn't start with Donald Trump. That erosion has been going on for decades, right? And I believe, unfortunately, it's part of the evolution also in this country, coming out of the 1950s, where every generation felt that it could do better than its parents. There was a sense in this country of the great promise that everyone could succeed. And higher education was an enormous part of that, growing in the 50s and the 60s. What has happened all the way back into the 90s and forward is we've stagnated and created a great income divide in this country between a very wealthy small fraction of people and a disappearing middle class. And that in higher education, when it was really at its best in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, really fed that middle class with that great promise. Cost has been a major issue for higher education. Access, which is coupled to cost, has been a major issue, both at publics and privates. And as you know, the cost of a public education has gone up precipitously from where it was when I went to school back in the early 1970s. And then you couple in that the political divide that all of that has created between the red and blue parts of this country. And it has put this country in a position where the higher education has become ground zero for what is many people would call a culture war over what is the basis of the country, what is the culture of the country, which is also added to that erosion. When you look at the Gallup poll numbers, and just use the Gallup poll numbers, that a great deal of that difference can be just described by politics. I mean, if you look in 24, 58% of the Democrats thought that universities were doing a great job and had high confidence, but only 15% of Republicans, right? And if you then turn around a year later, those two numbers have gone to 66 and 26, up 8 points for the Dems and 11 points for the Republicans. But there's still this huge divide that's politically based on how universities are viewed. I think universities are working on the right problems. They're working on access. They're working on careers and jobs and educations that map onto income gain for people, which I think is part of that promise to society. But that divide that's created politically is not going to heal very easily. It's not healing in the country, and it's not healing with the universities. And for the first time, this is the one thing that has happened the last year, universities have been drugged right into the middle of this in a very volatile way. And you can see no doubt in some conservative states, you can see swings in the way the universities are managed. Now, Texas and Florida are probably the poster children for this, are kind of really show how badly this is going to affect higher education.
Well, higher education in many ways doesn't have much control of some of those external factors. You brought up an interesting point, which is the heyday of higher education. Our peak was at the time when the middle class was really truly developing full speed. And now we reach a point where that sort of saturated, if not even actually went down. And that is hurting us, although the benefit is still acknowledged and there, right? People acknowledge that you get a university degree, you're better off. So there's a conflict, right, in the minds of individuals.
Well, I think, Raphael, it's gone from being in the 60s when you were or early 70s when you were the first person in your family to go to college. You were going to get on that economic escalator that goes with that college degree. Today, you're said that if you don't get that degree, you're going to get on the economic escalator going the other way.
That's a nice way of putting it, yes.
Right? And so it used to be something you did to raise yourself. Now it's something you do to stay even, right? And then couple that with what's happening to AI, which is going to clip off thousands and thousands of jobs at one end of the economy. That escalator is getting harder and harder to avoid, the one going down.
There's been a big change, and I'm going to quote you, actually, in a recent essay that you wrote for the Not Alone newsletter, the written partner to this podcast. You asked the question and entitled the essay, "Will the American Research University make it to its 100th birthday?" You base that argument or that question on the fact that for 75 years we have operated under a science policy written by Vannevar Bush way back then, entitled Science, the Endless Frontier, that has served us very well. Yet you felt that the recent conflicts and attacks on universities and the changes in the norms that govern research put in question the very survival of that policy and hence the very survival of the enterprise. Do you still feel that way?
Yeah, actually more so, unfortunately. When I wrote that essay, and you remember, I had been doing some research in research universities for the year before, so this predates the election. you can see that research universities have been financially stretched over the last decade by their own investments within the universities to keep their research enterprise vibrant. If you look, and I quote this in that essay, in 2022, universities spent to where they were spending 46 cents for each federal dollar that they were getting on research. And that was up by almost a factor of 2 from, say, 2005. And so there's been this slow increase where universities have had to shift their funding into research to stay research active. And that's because the enterprise of research in the United States has gotten very large. It was almost $100 billion that year, university research. And I question the ability of the system to continue to fund research at that level. And that was really the basis of my argument, that there is going to be changes. And that predates all the precipitous actions of the Trump administration. All those things did, in my mind, was accelerate things within universities, changes, and put them in a very precarious position that they can't make these changes in a very thoughtful way, right? And as you and I know, we don't really know how many shoes are going to drop yet in terms of where the federal budgets for research will end up, what will happen with indirect cost recovery by universities. All of those things could have a devastating effect on the whole enterprise at a time when universities have to deal with things like student access and success and low-income students, demographic shifts in the country, and then AI. All those things are hitting the universities simultaneously.
Yeah. So given that situation, what is going on, and as you pointed out, given that this was sort of already coming and it has been accelerated in an incredible way, is there a hope for Endless Frontier 2.0?
There's got to be. I mean, if we want to maintain the quality of life in this country and our relevance in the world, we have to figure out a 2.0, right? And there has to be a covenant with the federal government that funding research universities and funding higher education at the right level is in the long-term good of our society. And I think most people, if you ask them an up or down, thumb up, thumb down, whether or not that should happen, the thumb is up. It's all the caveats that are attached to that are going to make it very difficult to do. And because it's going to take enormous bipartisan support in our legislature, in our Congress, to make that happen. And it's going to take an administration who wants to see it happen, right? I'm not convinced it's going to happen anytime soon. We're going to have to weather a very turbulent period.
The Not Alone podcast is a collaboration between Elsevier and Professor Raphael Brass. We bring unfiltered perspectives on global issues by research and academic leaders. Experts from MIT, Harvard, UCLA, and beyond bring their conviction and compassion to a wide range of topics. Follow our channel for fresh content. And now, back to the show.
Let's talk about that Endless Frontier 2.0 concept. Is it reasonable to expect or think that in the United States, we're going to come out of this, even in the rosiest of pictures, with the same number of research universities? Do you see a change in the different groups and universities, public, private? How is that going to play out?
you're going to make me the Grim Reaper on your podcast, because I'm afraid, and as you know, I've been doing statistical analysis and actually modeling, that what's going to happen is a number of what schools that believe they're research universities are going to become subcritical. So imagine a department of chemistry, somebody pick on chemistry, in which if the federal funding for chemistry research drops by some percentage, say half or 30%, pick a number, that chemistry department is going to end up over a period of time having a large fraction of its faculty with no research support. They will be research inactive. That will culturally change that department. The doctoral students in that department will only be working with a subset of the faculty. The subset of the faculty will really be involved in what I'd say tenure and promotion cases, judging research. The whole culture that has grown up around the meritocracy that Vannevar Bush imagined with peer-reviewed research, where you ended up with whole departments that were involved at some level with the enterprise, will be broken. And that will devastate some universities. They will not be able to keep a research culture. And so I believe that a large fraction, some fraction of the institutions, will have to change the way they do research fundamentally. But if you look internationally, there are many countries who have put most of their research money into specialized institutes. I mean, if you think in Germany, you think of the Max Plancks and the Fraunhofers, which were originally not connected with the universities at all. They're separate institutions. And originally, they didn't even do doctoral education. Now they do doctoral education. But you could think of those as places of aggregating together the very best researchers they have in a totally research-focused culture. We did not do that. What Vannevar Bush did not do that. With the creation of the National Science Foundation and the development of the NIH extramural program in the 70s, we decided to make the money freely available to everyone and let the market of ideas win in the end. But if there's not enough money in the market, then what happens is the market will collapse.
Yeah, that's a real possibility. And I in fact, agree with you. Now, when addressing a little bit the model of the Max Planck Institutes and so on, one big difference, which in my opinion makes the research university in the United States quite unique, is that we never separated the education from the research. It was one and the same. And that synergy not only, I believe, produced better output and better ideas and more innovation, but it also prepared the next generation with the same money. Yeah. And that's unique, and that seems to be going by the wayside.
When our system was based on what I call the teacher-scholar model, that these research universities were populated by faculty who did research and I'm going to focus on an undergraduate teaching, right? And they taught the undergraduates. And when you say something is different today than when you and I were undergraduates, when I was an undergraduate graduate student at the University of Minnesota, and at that point, Minnesota was probably the best chemie department in the country, all these faculty members who were National Academy members, going to be National Academy members, all taught undergraduates, right? And when I was there as a graduate student, I was taught to teach undergraduates, right? And it was not something that was pushed off on a second-class piece of the faculty. It wasn't pushed off on lecturers. It was done by the faculty. And that was the way the operation worked. That has changed a lot in our universities. Now, today, we have what we would call star faculty. We have faculty who don't teach undergraduates. We have faculty that are brought in only to teach undergraduates and don't do research. There's been a shift in the model that has occurred over the last few decades, and that's really been caused, I think, because of how difficult it is to get research funding and the scale.
And the dependence on research, both reputationally and financially. And that's something that a lot of people forget. It's not the financial issue that drives a lot of this, it's the reputational issue. I've always have stated, I wonder whether you agree, that in big research universities, the reputation is based on research, the budget is based on education of undergraduates.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the things that's true, and I've done a lot of work on this, trying to convince people, is universities do not make money on research. Research costs money. That, when I said 46 cents on a dollar, for many of those cents are money that's going in to subsidize getting those federal dollars, right? And so universities are not making money on research, but it's critical to their reputation, right? Critical to their reputation today. Is it as important as your football team? That's a question of the institution.
Let's not go there. But you brought up many times you have brought up the education of doctoral students and how inseparable is that from the research model that developed after the endless frontier. Nowadays, a lot of those graduate students, PhD students, are born elsewhere. They're foreign students coming to graduate education. That has made it feasible for us to build a research enterprise, and in many ways is feeding the high-tech industry and other industries very effectively. We are at a moment where it is fair to question whether many of those students will come any longer to a United States because they do not perceive it as a welcoming opportunity, and certainly not as a future opportunity. Do you agree with that? Have you thought some of that?
I think, Raphael, one of the things that really frustrates me more than anything, and although I'm trying to count now, 6th generation American, I'm a German American, right? My family came to Texas in the 1830s from Germany. They settled in Germany. Lived in part of what San Antonio that used to be the German town, brought up on a street that was known as Gunther Street, next to the Gunther Flour Mill. The street next to us in my day was called King William Street, but if you look in the Carnegie Library, you can see the Kaiser Wilhelm Strasse sign that came down in 1918. When they decided it was no longer good to have a German street name in the United States. So I believe totally in this great immigration of us bringing talented, ambitious people to this country. And as you said, our technical workforce in this country has been really energized, and this has gone on for the last 100 years, by immigration into this country. And today we rely on it. You title your podcast, "We Are Not Alone," is something that is really important for the country to understand. it's also a form of soft power for the country, bringing people here and showing what a great life they can have and how they can contribute. I think we're at a perilous place where we will not easily reverse, where talent is afraid to come here because they don't see a welcoming environment. They don't see even the possibility of staying long term. The $100,000 green card is frightening a lot of people. I think this is really a major shift in government policy that'll have detrimental effects for decades if we don't reverse it very quickly. And I say that also about undergraduates and graduate students alike, right? Although we really, from a research perspective, rely very heavily on the graduate students, a lot of people came here as undergraduates as well and have made a huge mark on this country.
Yeah. Yeah, just to clarify, the 100,000 is on the H-1B visa. Let's not even a green card. If I can
not
put it
even a
that way.
green card. No, it's just the H-1B visa.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah. No, I think that's a concern that is dampening the spirits of students already here who are thinking of leaving, and some have left, because opportunities are perceived better elsewhere. Some of the argument made that you hear in the political realm is that, well, get more U.S. students, admit more U.S. students. Is that a possibility?
Well, yeah. The question about these institutions, and I again will kind of focus on research universities, is the sense of meritocracy we must have, right? We're a country of a little over 300 million people. And the world has, 9 billion? Do we believe that all the smart people in the world are in that 300 million? Or should we be a country that tries to aggregate at its top, at its leading institutions, the smartest people it can find? Now, you and I both know that how you define smart is a perilous journey, right? It's not easily done. It's not done off standardized tests. It can't be done only off the curriculum someone took or what school they attended. It's a difficult task. But I think the leading institutions in this country should try to aggregate together the most capable, the most ambitious students they can for the good of the country at the end of the day. Now, of course, privates and publics have slightly different missions. State schools have an obligation to the state that's funding them to make sure their citizens are educated. But those states, for the most part, and Georgia would be a great example, have a system of higher education. Not just one university or two universities, a whole handful. Massachusetts has the same thing. And so there should be seats for everyone. But the question is where, right? I think, I'm sounding elitist when I say that. And I know people will take it being elitist. But that sense of meritocracy, of bringing the smartest people together and teaching and researching at the highest level, is critical to our society going forward. And if you look at other countries, we're not alone in doing that. Not at all, right? And not doing it, I think, puts us in a perilous place.
But there's arguably the argument that even if we were to basically allow everybody in, if I can put it that way, that there's simply not enough people to fill all the university slots. From the U.S. people to fill all the university slots at the graduate level. Undergraduate is a different story. So you could not keep the same number of institutions. That goes back to our previous question. How will things shake out? That will sort of predict a retrenchment considerable magnitude.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There has been a shrinking going on of higher education for several decades. And the demographic shifts that are going on in this country are precipitating that, and the birth rate will precipitate that even further. But what's happening in terms of international students in trying to push them out in a way will drive that very rapidly in a lot of institutions. And we were involved at BU in merging a small institution into BU that was failing. This is pre-pandemic.
Bob, I cannot end this podcast without asking the question that is required in every conversation. What about AI? How do you see it changing higher education? How do you see it changing research?
It is the 800-pound gorilla, right? If we didn't have all these other dumpster fires that we had to put out, we should be focusing all the energy that we're putting on those dumpster fires on that question, right? Because AI is going to change precipitously our society. It's going to change how we teach in universities. It's going to change how students are prepared when they come to universities. It's going to change how they work when they go out. And it's going to drive us even further away from trying to fill students' heads with facts to filling them with the ability to make judgment, critical decisions in a complex world. Because facts are truly going to become ubiquitous. Just as a funny thing, the other day I was working on a problem trying to solve a variable coefficient linear differential equation. And I said I was in one place, I didn't have the book I needed. So I Googled and got a beautiful description of how to do what I needed to do. And then I learned how to put in the exact equation I had, and it solved it for me. Right? And at the end of this, I felt fairly useless. The only thing I was able to do was ask the right question to Google, right? I was able to frame it because I knew enough to do that it could give me the answer, right? And that's the world people are going to be living in when they're looking for a fact.
Well, part of the question, though, is what you just said. When they're looking for a fact, AI, needless to say, at the moment at least, cannot always be trusted of having the right facts, because it takes anything and everything that is out there.
No, that's right. No, in assimilating facts is still going to be, for some time to come, the province of a human, right? Of deciding how to make judgment and make decisions based on those facts. When the complexity of the situation doesn't give you a clear avenue, right? It's interesting that at the end of the day, it'll be fascinating to watch how athletics picks up AI. We're not too far from American baseball that the umpire will not call balls and strikes, because that's a fairly simple, very unambiguous thing you can do. But there's many other things in baseball you could not rely on AI today to get right, right? Even in something as simple as baseball. So the umpire's not going away. Now, believe me, the umpires union's not going to like it when the home umpire doesn't call balls and strikes.
But let's follow the sports analogy a little bit. Isn't the ambiguity that occurs in high-level sports in calling the shots or deciding what is right, what is wrong. Part of the game, the same way as I would say art, the creative process of arts, is all about the ambiguity. It's all about the implied, not the clear cut. So are we losing that?
Well, if we become a world in which we just ask the machines to run us, we will lose it, right? We'll lose. I always think of some of the most important properties we have contextually when we're making decisions are things like empathy. Empathy for the people that are affected by the decision, right? And you as a provost, how many times did you have to make a decision and you could still be sympathetic for the people that you were making a judgment that was negative to them, right? That's part of being human. It's part of an important part of our community and society that we cannot give up easily, right? Because if we do, we'll be very different.
Absolutely. You've been always very good of having a clear crystal ball to look at the future. I've always admired the way you can look at the trends and see where things are going. So with that in mind and the discussion we just had about AI, if I ask you how would BU or Georgia Tech, a private and a public university, look 10 years from now, 50 years from now?
Well, I don't know my crystal ball is that good, but one of the things I think is going to happen is that a lot of the AI tools we have to understand will be ubiquitous. And you see that developing already. So that the tools that one school has versus another school will be the same. The best in class ability to teach calculus and use AI will not be easily kept proprietary at one place. So each school is going to have to develop its own identity around how it frames its education with this foundation of tools and approaches that are fairly common with everyone. So the question will be, I don't want to get into will it be 4 years or 2 years or 3 years, but the truth is a lot of the material will be pretty standardized across a collection of students that have a certain capability to absorb it. So these institutions will develop identities, I think, in a way that actually goes back. There's a throwback all the way back to the inventing of the printing press, in the sense that the way that they use their time between their faculty and their students will set their identity in ways that it's not set now, right? Now the identity is pretty much set by kind of a standard approach. I give you material, I put it up on the blackboard or transparency or in a PowerPoint and you absorb it, right? But that's going to go away. And so what's going to happen is universities will invent their identity around how they use their time, not the content of what they teach. And at the same time, I think the research, going back to research for a second, it's inevitable that universities to succeed in research are going to have to be more focused than they have before. I've said many times that the approach that we used for the last 50 years of 1,000 flowers blooming is going to lead to a wilted garden, right? That there will have to be areas and focus in an institution about where they can be good. And by good, I mean they have to be competitive on a national or international scale for resources going to be much scarcer than they have been in the past. And that's going to be a different world. And it's going to be very divisive in institutions, because you and I grew up in institutions where everybody had exactly the equal probability. The institution didn't pick winners and losers. And I think more and more you're going to see institutions putting resources into areas where they think they can excel, and by definition, not in areas where they don't.
And hopefully they would have a pretty good crystal ball to figure that out. That's the danger.
That's the danger. But that's what leadership is about, right? At the end of the day, leadership is not about shirking the ability to make decisions. The question is, how do you institutionally put in processes to make those decisions, and how do you withdraw them? One of the things about institutions you didn't ask, but you and I know, it's easy to build, it's hard to tear down, right? That's if universities have one failing grade, is they don't discontinue things easily, right? They don't discontinue things easily. And that sometimes that's very good, because, as you know, things tend to have cycles and come back, right?
Yeah, so you have to be maybe even nimbler in being able to set a direction, but be willing to pivot quickly.
I think COVID taught us that.
And that's not easy. Bob, this has been wonderful. I really thank you so much for sharing with the listeners of Not Alone Conversations with Leaders. As usual, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. As we were chatting, it brought back very, very good memories. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Rafael. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Not Alone, Leaders in Conversation. We hope this discussion today sparked new ideas and left you with plenty to think about as you continue to lead in your own institution. If you found this conversation interesting, insightful, or thought-provoking, please share this episode with your colleagues, peers, and friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your preferred platform so you can stay up to date with our latest episodes.